honeysuckle or something, and then someone would paint the honeysuckle for him, and then they send it to the printer where he'd go write another note that said, put in a nice southern landscape with plantations or something.
Where'd the plants come from in this one?
The plants in my, oh yeah, you got me on this one. This is really funny. When I was doing this body of work, I had a show, and a botanist from Smith College came up to me, and he said, can you sign this, my catalog, can you sign, and so I signed it. And I said, Guy, you're a botanist at Smith, that's cool. I really don't know that much about plants. And he said, yeah, I know. And I was like, shit. So what I did is he gave me things to look at. Right. And one of the most brilliant pseudo-scientific treatises on the growth of plants was written by, oh God, what's his name again? The famous British critic of the Pre-Raphaelites, who's also an artist and begins with R. Who?
Ruskin.
Ruskin.
Yeah, I heard it too. John Ruskin.
Ruskin wrote these things about plant growth that the botanist at Smith said he wrote them as an anatomy of plants for artists, and he said that no one noticed this stuff scientifically for 100 years after Ruskin, and nobody bothered in the scientific community to notice that he had discovered principles of plant growth that were going to be proven by science just with observation. The guy was so obsessive. So I got Ruskin.
And so your plants are a lot more accurate than
now.
Yeah,
I think of Ruskin and the Smith guy breathing down my throat. I mean, breathing down my neck. But this is like fake plant life, and you can kind of tell. It bugs me now.
So tell us, tell us about where your ideas come from, because I know your work is it's very iconography specific, yet at the same time it's not all that important for us, the viewers, to know that iconography.
I mean, I do
Talk about that a little bit.
I'm interested in, if you look at Bosch, Hieronymus Bosch paintings, or Bruegel, or you look at, if you're me and you're raised as a secular Episcopalian in Westchester County, and you go to Rome and start looking at that stuff, the religious art, the iconography is completely weird and trippy, and you don't understand anything that you're seeing, but you can still love the painting.
Right.
And so I thought I can make a visual language for myself that's quite personal, and it'll still somehow inform the imagery if it really has an inherent logic. In other words, I don't just put it in there to make it weird. Everything is in there for a reason. And the surrealism comes out of stuff I've read, things that I thought about. There's no, you know what I mean? I remember when I was at RISD, there was a girl who had painted a nude from and then there was a monkey in it. And the teacher was like, well, why did you draw the monkey? He was like, well, she was like, everyone else was painting weird things. And I thought, well, that's so, so that monkey principle has stuck with me. Like, don't paint the monkey just to, don't do that.
So tell us, what was the background behind this painting? What were your sources? What were you thinking about?
In this painting?
Yeah.
I'd just gotten back from India. And this was from a trek in Nepal. It's called Kathmandu Guest House. And I was thinking about, I'd seen fruit bats roosting in trees in huge numbers. You see these things that at first you think are crows, because they don't fly like bats like this. They're big. They've got like 3-foot wingspan, and they come overhead in straight lines like crows going to a roosting site or something. And my wife, we're sitting there outside and looking at these, and she was like, those are bats. She thought she was going to faint. And they all go into this tree and they hang there and they're eating fruit. They eat fruit like this. They just swallow it and spit out all the other stuff. Or I don't even know if they spit anything out. I think they just eat it all. They're very weird. And they're easy to miss because they look like birds. They come in at dusk and then they hang in the trees and look like fruit in the tree. They're just hanging there. You can walk right by them without seeing them. And they're all over Kathmandu, like right in the middle of the city. I mean, India and, those parts of the world are crazy. I mean, there's a monkey going to come in your hotel room and take your stuff. And, you can't believe the stuff that starts to happen. So I was interested in painting the weirdnesses, and that's underneath the branch. And then I have starlings there, and I thought of them as sort of like tourists. Because they don't live in India.
Right?
And they're missing everything they're seeing the parrot and the myna bird. They're seeing but they're missing the whole thing with the...
The starling is a recurring bird in your work, and you were telling me the other day about why you like the starling.
Yeah, starlings they were imported from Europe, and they don't belong here, and they become great pests, as we all know. But there was an Englishman who wanted to introduce all the birds from Shakespeare into the United States, which is a great idea. And he introduced those things into Pet Central Park, and he did it 3 times before they finally took. And the great thing is the first starling nests were on the Museum of Natural History, right on the building. It's so perfect.
Which, of course, is where you went a lot.
Oh, yeah, it's where I get all my animals from. Yeah, it's like ground zero for this kind of stuff that I'm interested in. And so, and then they spread, obviously, everywhere. And and now they live in New Zealand, Australia as well for the similar reasons, nothing to do with Shakespeare, but. And so they're like Anglo-Saxons. I just thought they're obnoxious. They move everywhere. They take over other birds' nest holes. They're kind of beautiful, kind of. They make a lot of shrill little noise, and they take over. It's, when starlings move in, it's starling culture is going to take over, not all the other birds. So that's what we do. We move in, and it's us. It's all about us. That's McDonald's, everything. Take it or leave it. This is starling territory now. So I made I made a starling painting where the starling was about 10 feet long. And all the other birds are feeding it.
That's reproduced in the Taschen book, is it not?
Oh yeah, everything's in the Taschen book. Yeah. My whole life's work is in there, except for my student work
that you won't own up to. Okay.
That I won't own up to.
Okay. There's a monkey in this one?
Yeah. Always
monkey riding on the back of an alligator. What's that all about?
Oh yeah, that's in the show. It's a folk tale from India. In the folk tale, the monkey and the crocodile make friends, and the monkey starts throwing sweet fruits down out of this tree, and the crocodile is like, God, these are delicious, And so the crocodile brings some of the fruits to his wife, and his wife says, God, these are so good. Where'd you get them? And he says, from this monkey. And he says, well, the monkey eats these fruits all day? And the crocodile's like, yeah. The wife's like, we've got to eat that monkey. It's going to be delicious. So this is the moment when the crocodile's taking his friend on his back, and he's about to bring the monkey to his wife. And I was just thinking about India, how they have the bomb and everything, and I don't know, I just thought somehow it was related to the moment when India can go from being this sort of peaceful Hindu kingdom into eating the monkey and joining the rest of us as nuclear powers and big heavyweights. And I mean, they're really kind of in this funny transitional period where they're going to become a superpower. So what's going to happen? Are they going to eat the monkey? Because in the folk tale, actually, they start swimming over, and the monkey says, and actually, because the wife says, I want to eat the monkey's heart, especially. It's going to be delicious. And so as they're swimming over, the monkey says, well, where are we going? He says, I'm going to take you to my wife. And he starts to feel bad. He goes, the truth is that my wife wants to eat your heart. So the monkey says, well, I left it up in the tree, if you'll just let me. So, of course, the crocodile swims back. And monkey's like, doesn't make friends with crocodiles after that. But I feel like India still remains to be seen whether it's going to eat the monkey's heart or not.
Here's your friend King Kong.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. This is a painting about the Museum of Natural History. This is, if you go to the Museum of Natural History, there's dioramas, and they're the most beautiful things you've ever seen. If you're used to taxidermy and you think you know what it looks like, yeah, right. It's ugly and it's stiff and it's got dust on its eyeballs and everything. But these things are masterpieces. The men that made the dioramas made sculptures of the animals that were anatomically accurate, and then laid the skin over that and made it perfect. So there's veins and blood vessels. I mean, the thing's absolutely ravishing. And then the backgrounds were painted by the very best landscape artists in America at that time. And so we're talking about like 1920s, right up until the 30s, they made most of these dioramas. It's boggling how beautiful these things are. Carl Akeley was the guy that came up with the techniques to do these things. And he loved gorilla land, and he was the first guy to go and study gorillas, and he died of dysentery after collecting and shooting a lot of gorillas up on the slopes of Mount Kivu, which is the setting for the gorilla diorama. In other words, they've reconstructed where he died. When you're looking into the diorama in New York, you see where he was buried after he died from dysentery after shooting a lot of gorillas. And so my idea was that, the guy's a genius. He's one of those, it's like, I love my complicated heroes. They go and kill gorillas, but they're brilliant artists. And everything's more interesting when it's complicated. And so later, Diane Fossey or somebody like that was looking for Akeley's grave to sort of, check it out and pay tribute to the great man. And had been robbed. His skeleton was gone.
Wow.
So I figured that gorillas did it, I think they collected him back,
Do you think all animals are evil?
That's not evil.
No.
Carl Akeley brought it on himself. And there's one in the background. They're just curious. They found this funny hole in the ground, and they start pulling up bones and dragging them off. This one's got a carcass. And, that's what's going on. You can see the real painting. I mean, the slides are over there.
Right.
Paintings are in there.
Now, this one wasn't able to travel here, but this was probably one of your most ambitious ever.
Yeah, this was a killer, yeah.
Tell us about what's going on, how long it took to make it.
Yeah, it took about a year to make.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 18 feet by 14 feet high, something like that. It's a life-size Asian elephant. And I was thinking I'd been to Asia. I was thinking about what I was saying, all the stuff about cultural misapprehension and stuff. And I started thinking about why do we go to Asia? Everyone from, why, you take in the elephant's range. So, why did we go to Vietnam? But then again, why did the Beatles go to India? Why do sexual tourists go to Bangkok? Like, why does everybody why are we going there? What are we looking for? Spiritual enlightenment, wealth, all the different things that we're looking for. So each one of the panels has a bird, all the birds are from the West. They're not Asian birds, except for the cock, which is an Asian bird, but nevertheless. The metaphor is the Western birds, either American or English or, European birds, passing over the Asian elephant. And the Asian elephant is in must, which is the state of sexual arousal that males go into. It's like going into heat. And when they're like that, they'll kill anything that's in their way. Mm-hmm. They become extremely dangerous. But the explanation in the Sanskrit texts is that they're so full of joy that they become dangerous. And it's beautiful danger. It's the most beautiful animal, in their opinion, is an elephant in must. So that's kind of cool. I thought that's the dichotomy that is Asia. It's like you could get bitten by a malaria mosquito and get dysentery in Rajasthan and never make it out, but it's beautiful there, So
paradox.
That's what the painting is about. Mm-hmm. And so there's like 22 or 3 different panels. I made each one is a separate composition that takes in an aspect of why Westerners go to Asia. Each of the birds is metaphorical, and they're touching down on pressure points that you can use to drive an elephant if you're an elephant driver. And some of the pressure points numb the elephant, some of them harm the elephant, some of them drive him forward, some of them make
How
us
did you learn all
go
this?
backwards. I spent a lot of time in there's an Asian part collection in the New York Public Library, mm-hmm. and where a lot of Sanskrit texts are translated into English, because I haven't learned that language, and I probably won't.
But I mean, this is something important to realize, that a lot of research really does go into the making of your paintings.
The paintings are as much about research as anything else. The paintings are about our cultural history, and I use animals either as a metaphor or the animals are actually in the cultural history. It's our cultural history. It's the cultural history of our interaction with the animal world, basically, on some level.
By our, you mean the human race?
Human race, yeah. How we write about them, how we think about them, our interpretations of their behaviors, from when we first... Because I suddenly realized how big my topic was, because the very first art ever made was somebody drawing a bull on the wall, on the ceiling of a cave in France, or someplace like that. And that is very, and it was life size. That's part of the power that my project has co-opted. Is just that this is magic stuff that goes back a long way, Oh brother, there's so many stories. You got to tell me not to tell some of these stories.
Tell them. People want to know.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm exhausting company after a while, I guarantee. In the Zurich Zoo, there was a female Black Panther, and they put a male in there, and she didn't like the male they stuck in there with her. So she somehow squeezed, and this is in the 1930s, 1934, and she squeezed out of some tiny ventilation thing somehow and got loose. And I read about it in a book for a zookeeper's manual by the zookeeper of the Zurich Zoo, who wrote this up as a case history.
Is that just sort of on your reading list?
This is always the kind of stuff. I go to used bookstores, you know, and I go right to the natural history part or the animal part.
Right.
I got about 5 places I got to go every time I go into a used bookstore. And I found this book. It was called Animals and Men, a Zookeeper's Manual by Heine Heidegger. I like that. So good old Heine told me about this. And she got out in the dead of winter and was all through the winter time up and down the Swiss countryside. Nobody knew where the hell she was. They had a clairvoyant try to find out where she was. People reported tracks in Italy and France. I mean, she was everywhere at once, just like a Yeti or something.
Was there a lot of news coverage of this?
Tons of news coverage. The Zurich Zoo got more visitors than they'd ever gotten. They went to look at the cage she escaped from. And it's right on the eve of the Second World War. And I thought about Swiss villagers at that time of year. They go out and they bang drums and they blow horns and they carry torches. It was in the Golden Bough, the Dutch of this book about all different ceremonies of peoples and folk tales and things. Anyhow, I thought they're trying to scare away evil spirits, you know, for Twelfth Night or something. And at this time, there really was something out there, you know, something that was.
So did they ever find her?
Yeah, a peasant found her under a barn and shot her and ate her. Yeah.
Oh my God.
He ate her. Yeah. It was lean times, 1934, in the Swiss.
What's going on in the background there?
Those villagers are coming out for their 12th night ceremonies to scare away the evil spirits, and lo and behold, there is something absolutely terrifying out there. Yeah.
Now, who's this serpentine character?
Yeah, it's like I saw a lot of people in India keep mongoose in their house. In a restaurant, I remember sitting in a restaurant, and the mongoose, they put a little plate of rice practically under our feet, and this little mongoose came out and started eating it and like made a nasty face at me and then ran back. It's like, holy mackerel. It's India. You got to just give it up, you know. It's so amazing. And they kill snakes, huh?
You're talking about the text?
There's 2 different types of mongoose in the pictures I remember. This little kind of beige one and the big gray one. And the little beige one of them is getting eaten and then the other. So all I'm doing is listing the different species. And there's only two different species in there, I think, they're the real snake killers, those mongoose. Well, this is what I put, this is a painting about all the mongoose are fighting amongst themselves, and they barely notice the thing that they ought to be joining forces against. That's my idea. It's like divide and conquer. They're all in their fractious disputes, and they're never going to notice that.
And of course, as in all your work, it's the animals behaving badly or stupidly, really, are metaphors for how people behave.
This is human behavior here. Yeah. And this is human behavior, too. Now, this brings us right back to the first painting, almost, that you showed,
right,
Martha.
The passenger pigeons.
Because these are passenger pigeons. Mm-hmm. And they landed in such great numbers that when they landed in their roosting grounds, that Audubon said that whole branches of trees would break off under their weight. Like, it happens in great snowstorms. I've seen that. But just the branches start falling in the forest from the weight of these birds. And I loved that image, I thought that's insane. And, because there were billions. These were, probably the largest number of terrestrial, above the water vertebrates or something, And I started thinking about that, and I thought, I wanted to make a painting about blaming the victim, in a sense. So the branch is full of passenger pigeons, but they're all acting in really disgusting ways. They're raping each other, they're stealing each other's eggs, they're killing each other, there's gluttony on the branch, and they're oblivious to what's happening to them.
This is really, a great example of the Bruegel influence in your
work. This was totally about Bruegel, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The blind leading the blind.
And there's also also compositionally, because Bruegel has 2 different modes. One is the big central thing, like the blind leading the blind, and the other is the millions of little disparate things that make it hard for you to focus on one thing, and Bosch does it as well in the Garden of Earthly Delights. And it works especially well when you're cataloging foibles or sins to have many, 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 many figures, you know, and just start to overwhelm the viewer with all these figures.
You told me this was a really tough one to make, right, this painting?
Technically, this was a challenge, no
Yeah.
doubt. You know, and this was the idea of you know, I did, when I was a kid, I had contempt of what I was good at. I thought, I can paint birds and animals. I can draw birds and animals. So then the test became, okay, how can I make it hard for even me to get this thing across? Like, I want to give myself a technical challenge and the elephant, or this, push myself as far as I can. If you begin with a facility, then why not see how far that facility can be pushed, you know? And in a sense, that's what Audubon did, because you paint every bird in North America. After a while, you're like, oh my God, you know? It's overwhelming what he accomplishes, and I wanted to do stuff like that. I was interested in that 19th century excess. Always leave them wanting less.
Well, I think we have a lot of 21st century excess now, too.
Yeah. Yeah, everything, all of that. But I was saying that I did have I have a visual gift, I think, that I can kind of rotate things in space. I was telling somebody earlier, that computer program thing, for some reason I got that as like an extra little thing. I didn't get much else, so most of the rest of it I have to work really hard at. But I could see the birds and without a lot of difficulty draw what they would look like from this side, that side, this side. But then I also went to the Museum of Natural History where they have an exhibit, and I got down on the floor practically looking up at the exhibit and down at the exhibit and side. Yeah, I tried to draw the bird from every conceivable angle because I knew I would need that later. So I do a lot of research. But you know, the thing goes down in space. It also gets lighter to darker. It also is around in space. It's also like all of them flying off the branch. There's a lot of stuff to think about.
Boca Grande.
Yeah. Well, I had I don't know, it's sort of based on an Aesop fable where the frogs want a king. They decide they need a king. So Zeus throws a log in their pond, and they get all over the log, and they're sitting around on the log. And they're like, it's kind of a relief to have a log in the pond. But after a while, they say, this is no king. This guy isn't doing anything. And so they say, get us a proper king. And of course, Zeus sends them a stork, which is a very good king for them. And so I was thinking about how we have a lot of stork leaders right now. And so that there's a lot, you know, that's all. It's just take that metaphor as far as you want, you know. And I was in Boca Grande in Florida, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it there. It's a lot of McMansions and people with expensive boats, and I didn't think they got even where they were anymore. It probably was a really cool place once upon a time, but I didn't like it, so I wanted to set and it means big mouth, so it was a perfect place to put my picture. Yeah, as a monkey, I think there'll be more monkeys in this is good, because this will get us through a couple of slides, I think, right? There's an African explorer called Sir Richard Burton, who spent his early years, he was not Richard Burton the actor, but the explorer, and he was in the 19th century one of the British Empire's most talented spies. He was a linguist. He spoke over 30 languages. He was a great swordsman. He could play you chess blindfolded and still beat you. He was this sort of crazy genius, and nobody liked him. Everybody hated his guts. He was impossible, you know. When he was trying to discover the source of the Nile, somebody a Somali warrior threw a spear through his head, and he held the shaft up and continued to tell people what to do, and they cut the shaft and pulled it through the other side, and he went back to England and recovered, and then went back to Somalia the next year to find the source of the Nile. So this guy lived in India